So good morning, everyone. My name is Neta Raz, and I'm the Skills Development Officer at UBC. I join you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx, Okanagan people. As an immigrant to this land, I really appreciate the willingness of Indigenous peoples to share their traditional knowledge, history and cultures with people like myself. I see this as a very important part of my journey for decolonization, and I'm truly grateful for that. I invite you to write in chat on whose traditional territories you are joining us from. Caitlin will post in chat a link to native land. This is a great map tool for locating traditional territories. We also love to hear from you if there is a topic you would like us to consider for a future webinar. So please tell us the topic in the feedback poll at the end of the session. So about UBC, we provide support for your small business journey. So we offer financing to get businesses started and operating capital to fuel growth. We offer more flexibility than traditional lenders because we take a holistic approach to provide loans based on your business viability and not based on formulas. And it means that we provide loans to a diverse range of women-owned businesses and support you with an integrated services, including complementary training like this webinar, mentoring and business advising. So from essential business skills development to personalized business advice, we know the right questions to ask and the right resources to connect you with. In our mentoring programs, you can connect with a network of women entrepreneurs and experts around BC who can support and inspire you. And you can learn more about our services on our website at we-bc.ca. Please sign up to our e-blast and get notified of our upcoming webinars and other programs. So for today's webinar, today we are going to talk about market research. And secondary market research is essential to test your ideas and give credibility to your plan. But it can be challenging to find reliable sources and zero in on the information you need without going down the research rabbit hole. So I am delighted to introduce our speakers today. Kim Buschert is the Faculty of Management Librarian at UBC Okanagan, and Aleha McCauley is the Community Engagement Librarian at UBC Vancouver. They will talk today about the typical questions secondary market research can answer, sources to find high quality data, and how libraries can help you access the information you need to help make your business competitive at any stage. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Kim and Aleha. Please introduce yourselves and take it from there.
Great, thanks so much, Neta. I'm just going to share my screen here. And if someone can just give me a thumbs up that that's looking okay, thank you. So thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you to you all for joining us today and for having us. We look forward to talking with you. I'm just going to see it. Okay, great. So we'd like to start as well by acknowledging the traditional caretakers of the lands we're on today. I'm a librarian at UBC Okanagan in the Faculty of Management. I've been here since 2015, and before that I worked at the Sauder School of Business's David Lamb Library at UBC in Vancouver. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And today I'm here at my home in Kelowna, where I live, work, and play as an uninvited guest on the unceded, traditional, and currently occupied lands of the Syilx Okanagan peoples.
And I just want to echo thanks for having us today. My name is Aleha McCauley, and I'm a librarian and researcher at UBC Library. And I've been in my current role for about 15 years. I use pronouns she, her. I completed both my studies at UBC Point Grey campus in Vancouver, now called Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam First Nation. And today I'm joining you from my home, my little kitchen office, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, including those of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Oops.
So yeah, our learning objectives for today, just to start off, we're hoping to help you learn how to find industry reports, statistics, and data, discover some tips to help you make the best of your research time, and explore what resources UBC Library can offer public researchers. And our agenda, just for our time with you, we'll start with an overview of secondary market research. What is it? What kinds of questions does it answer? And then we'll talk about some typical market research sources, so reports, stats and data, articles, and background research. And then we'll get into how to access information, so libraries and UBC Library in particular, and our Small Business Accelerator. And then we'll have time for questions. So at this point, we're going to save questions till the end, but you're welcome to put them in the chat as you think of them. And Netta and Caitlin have kindly agreed to save them for us, and we'll facilitate asking them live at the end. So to begin with, let's discuss market research more generally and the kinds of questions that it answers. Market research can give you information on several aspects that are important to understanding the overall business landscape you're operating in. And here are some of the typical questions it can answer. And just to explain this a little bit, I've differentiated market research into categories in this graphic for the purposes of framing the questions, but it's probably more fluid than maybe I'm getting across here. So for example, we might talk about overall industry research and include your market within that. Or an important part of your market is the consumers of your product and services. But this is kind of how I've been thinking of it. So what's my industry? This would be where you are situated. So there might be regulatory information that you need to find out, general trends, challenges, and opportunities within that industry. And then in terms of the market, I think of that as the endpoint for your product or service. So where will you be? So that could be market size in a particular geography. What's the growth potential in that market? And as I mentioned, your customers and consumers. And who are my competitors? So who are the key players? What market share do they already hold? What is the market share that you might be able to get out of that? What strategies have they used to get into the market and within the industry? You might be able to find SWOTs. So what are their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and financial information. And then for customers, who are my customers? Demographics, consumer behavior, and marketing tactics might all be useful for you. So there are a lot of questions to answer and many different aspects to your research. Having considered these, what kinds of research have you had to do? We have a poll, which I'll ask Netta to launch for us. So what kinds of research have you had to conduct in the past? And you can select any or all of these. So competitor research, industry, market research, consumer research. And we've also just added a spot for general business planning type of research. So I'll give you a few 30 seconds or so to answer that. So maybe I'll let you show the results for us, Netta. Oh, cool. Okay, so lots of people with general business planning, market research, consumer research. Yeah, so all different kinds. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And of course, you'll notice that we are often using the term secondary market research, and you might be wondering why that is. And we differentiate primary from secondary in these kinds of ways. Primary research is data you gather yourself, for example, through surveying or interviewing potential customers. Secondary research is conducted by others and published by others as data, reports, statistics, and articles and more. At libraries, we collect and provide access to secondary information, but we also collect and provide access to information on how to conduct primary research. So that might be useful to you as well. So which type is better would really depend on your purpose. So how much time do you have? How much money do you have? There are pros and cons for each type of research. So for primary research, it's going to be very custom and specific to your needs because you've designed it to specifically answer your questions. But running surveys and collecting and analyzing data from them, it can be really time consuming, and it can be expensive, especially if you hire someone to run those surveys for you. And secondary research can save time that's already published, and it can be really authoritative, current, verifiable, not always specific to your needs because it's been published for someone else's purpose. And it can be expensive to get hold of the resources, but it can also be free. So that's something to consider as well. So in our work, Aleha and I support small business owners with finding secondary market research. As I said, at the University Library, that's part of our work, and we pay for subscriptions to industry standard sources through UBC Library. But there are many sources of high quality secondary research which are free, and we often recommend free resources. So this presentation is going to include examples of both. And you can probably guess that getting a full picture will mean looking at several types of sources and maybe even doing a combination of primary and secondary research. So we'd like to hear from you again. What industry or industries are you or is your business in? Let us know in the chat. Great, so childcare, education, publishing, sales, employment training, accounting, wide range, food industry, health coaching, ag, that's awesome, fitness, health, bookkeeping and accounting, that's great. Secondhand garment industry, food industry again, that's, yeah, natural foods, imports, art and education. So some of these are crossing industries at this point. Event facilitation. Thank you so much for participating for us. Human resources consulting, so consulting industries. Yeah, great. Thank you. Probably quite a few of those are consulting related as well, I would guess. So, so just to oops, let's see if I can get this going. Okay, so we thought in order to show you some typical types of information sources, we thought we would use an example business as a case study. And we've chosen flower shops as a more straightforward retail business, although of course people might have ways that they've innovated or disrupted this kind of business. So that might add complexity and additional industries or markets to research. So to start with, we'd like to highlight market research reports because they tend to be a great way to get a lot of information in one place. And so you might think about these if you were to hold one in your hand, which I don't know, I'm very much an electronic reader at this point, but if you were to hold a report in your hand, they can be 30, 50, 100 pages, be nice and glossy, contain industry level figures, as well as analysis on things like macro level trends, drivers, and outlook. And then you can get typical financial expectations and forecasts, major players and consumer trends, so covering quite a range. And these reports can be found in paid subscription databases. They can be purchased individually from producers. Sometimes industry associations will also produce industry overviews, and these might be free on their websites or only available to members. Market research reports can cost thousands of dollars. And chances are, if you Google any industry or product, you will find a report out there. And that doesn't necessarily mean you should spend that money on those reports. We'll talk more about how to obtain reports later, but I think it's something to know that there are market research report farms out there, and they just produce hundreds of reports very rapidly, and they don't always use good data sources or provide analysis. So when you're looking out, when you're starting out looking for secondary sources, it's worth thinking about what terminology to use. So for example, I thought about flower shop. I just think about going to the flower shop. And when I started searching for that in IBIS World Database, I just used the word flower shop and came up with all of these different industry reports related. And so then I realized, just because I think of them as flower shops, there might be a better word to use when I'm doing research, such as florist. Or I would say I'm going to use florist as well as flower shop when I'm searching. So you can use the North American Industry Classification System to check terminology and descriptions. Some reports will indicate what NAICS codes they cover within them. So that's a good way to start. And here's an example of a market research report I wanted to show from IBISWorld. And IBISWorld is one of our favorite databases to recommend because their reports have comprehensive coverage. They often have Canadian reports, and they're usually very current. So as you can see, this one is from June 2022. And this is a screenshot from their Industry at a Glance page, and I've blanked out the actual data because we're posting this webinar publicly. And this page will open the report, and then there would be detailed information on each different section available within it. Another thing I like about this database is that they have an overall picture of the supply chains being very heightened in news these days. So it's interesting to look at, and then you can check out their reports on the upstream and downstream industries to get a sense of what might affect your business from those. So as we all know, supply chain affects everything right on through from wholesalers to consumers these days and manufacturers. And another market research firm we like is MarketLine. And this is an example of a company report which has detailed information on a specific company. And while a small local business might not think of a large company like 1-800-Flowers as a direct competitor, although they might be, a report like this has a SWOT section within it that can have really good analysis on what they're doing right or what they're not doing right, what opportunities they might have, and these could be relevant to other companies to know about. And MarketLine is a firm from which you can buy reports directly, but they are included in a database called Business Source, which is one of the most commonly subscribed to business databases for libraries. So you could have access through your public library or at an academic library. Business Source is also very good for trade and scholarly articles as well as news sources. Next, we can talk about stats and data starting places, and this might form some of the content of the industry reports, or you can get standalone data tables and stats from various good sources. There are several sources for government and industry stats, which are widely available and easily accessed online and can provide insights related to product shipments, trade activity, business formation, patents, pricing, and economic trends, among other topics. However, data is not often presented explicitly for the subject you're interested in, so it can take some creativity and cross-checking of the data to get it as narrowly focused as you might need it to be. So on this slide, we've also highlighted a few other sources and publishers of industry-specific stats and data. So NGOs and think tank websites might have good information. And it might sound obvious, but company websites can be virtual gold mines of information. Public companies will have investor relations sections that are full of their annual reports, regulatory findings, and investor presentations that can provide insights into the individual company's performance as well as the industry at large. So next we'll drill down a little bit into a specific example relating back to our florist shop case study. And this is Industry Canada, which is a publicly available website, which is easily searchable by NAICS codes or keywords, especially for more straightforward industries. And this can be a good starting place for Canadian industries. It includes high-level industry overviews. So the top bubble is a sample of what you'll find about this industry, but you'll notice that the depth of information will vary from industry to industry. For instance, here you get data on the number, size, and location of establishments, which you can use to assess the existing level of competition within the industry in your province or territory. So for instance, in 2021, BC is the third largest employer of florists, with the majority being micro businesses of 1 to 4 employees. And the other thing that's great about Industry Canada is the financial performance indicators section, which is the lower bubble on our slide. And here you can find information of the average revenues, expenses, and profits for small and medium-sized businesses. And you can use this information for planning or to see how your business measures up to the competition. I won't go too deep into what is in a typical report, but I will mention that you can find stats for profitable and non-profit small and medium-sized businesses that includes net profits and net losses, and detailed financial data on revenues and expenses, industry averages, balance sheet items, and financial ratios. So that's all freely available on Industry Canada, and it covers over 1,000 industries with 30 different performance indicators, a great source. And the second example I wanted to show is Statista, which is a statistics portal. It integrates thousands of diverse topics of data and facts by market sector from a wide range of sources. They get these from market research, trade publications, journals, public polls, and government databases. And Statista publishes some of their content for free online. So if you were to Google, and Statista might come up and you might be able to get some good stuff, but the majority of the portal is behind a paywall. And UBC Library, among other libraries, have paid subscriptions to it. To get a little bit meta on Statista, it has a report we found from this past summer about the global revenue of the market research industry. And it exceeded $76.4 billion US in 2021, growing more than twofold since 2008. And North America generated the largest share of market research revenue in 2020. 54% of the total, followed by Europe with 23%. So market research is really a lucrative business. And portals like this pull data together in a really easy to use interface with great features. But you can dig around and find some of this content for free or ask for help from a local librarian. So if we go back to our case study, you see here a screenshot relating to flowers, and there are more stats than we could fit on the slide, a huge list. Data that can help you figure out supply, sales by province, sales of specific flowers and plant type, and sales by channel. So I would note that much of this data was originally aggregated and published by Stats Canada, and it is available through a CanSim search. So CanSim is a public website and free to use. So if you're new to market research, if you have a very specific question or researching a smaller niche industry, one tip I have is that you might want to start with searching for articles and background research. And articles can be really specific in scope, and they can also provide information on current trends and issues. So for instance, you can search for articles on markets, problems your product or service is intended to solve, and discover details about your competitors. If you pay attention to the latest news through trade-specific publications, business news, or even general news stories, and you might get some great information if the topic is big enough to interest the general public. So sometimes news stories will indicate their sources, and then you can add those sources to your general list of places to check as well. For finding articles and background research, industry associations tend to have sections on their websites for curated news stories relating to the industry. And generally, industry associations are trying to provide value to their members. So there can be a lot of great information on their sites, and surprisingly often, you'll be able to access it without a member login. So not always, but enough that we like to recommend checking out association websites. So you can find them by Googling, and then you just have to make sure they are the main association. And then to get industry level information, you might check a local association site, and then also look more broadly at the website of the national level association. So in this example, a Canadian association did a consumer research study and have published their results. So this is something you can just see right on their website for free. And then in the second example, this is a US Association of American Florists. They have a section for industry news and business tips. But this one is an example where if you click on something, you would get to a login screen, and they are limiting most of their information to their paid members. Some of the large consultancies like KPMG or Deloitte will publish reports and articles about industries. And this one is a free article on the Canadian retail sector. And they really go into detail about what they've determined to be 5 key areas of interest. So what's going on with revenues, supply chain, labor market, ESG, and adaptability within the retail sector in Canada. And here is a business news example. about inflation for florists from a publication that's focused on markets. And of course, you see that the full text is not publicly available. More and more now news outlets are requiring subscriptions, especially big publications like the Globe and Mail. So this will lead very nicely into the next part of our talk, because you can go to a library to get access to many news publications. And this one is available at UBC, for example. And just to finish off this section, we presented a case study that could be considered to reside in more of a standard industry, which is retail, but it may also cross industries to include online retail or business to business. And as we saw in our poll, many of you might be coming up with business ideas that cross industries or could be considered new or niche. So you could be looking to find market research from several industries, or there might be reports on specialized industries. And then really it will be about picking out what works for you to create that overall picture of your market. You could also look to broader industries or at the sector level, or even at wider geographies to find out what you need. So these are just some strategies that we think about. Competitors might have branched out into other areas, or they might have pivoted. So learning about what competitors are doing can be really useful. So at this point, I will pass it over to Aleha to talk about accessing information.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. So yes, Kim touched on several different publishers of secondary research, and you've seen examples that some are freely available on the web, others are behind paywalls, which is just essentially a method of restricting access to content that requires a purchase or paid subscription. So what's common about secondary research is that obviously it was created for the original author's intended purposes, so it will definitely take some tweaking to suit your needs. But just to switch over to this last section of our agenda, what I'm going to do is speak to the, not so much of the what, but now focus on the how and where, so you can hopefully leave today with some new ideas of how you can actually get access to some of these materials. So to kick us off, I wanted to invite Netta to just launch our last poll so we can learn a little bit more about your current practices. So I'll give you a few minutes, or not a few minutes, maybe a minute or so, just to share with us what you currently do. Thank you in advance for taking some time to share with us. Awesome. Okay, yeah, Google is definitely our friend here. That makes a lot of sense. And we kind of had a hunch here in terms of visiting libraries. So that's something we're going to touch on today. So hopefully you'll learn a little bit more and have some ideas of why you might want to work with us. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also maybe if we have time for questions, we can share some of our favorite Google tips too. Okay. So since we've learned earlier, and we know UBC has clients from all over the province, we really did want to touch on what you might be able to find even at your local public library or community college or your closest university library. So not just of what we have at UBC. So as we get into that, we've got a few examples on this slide, and wanted to sort of mention that collections will definitely vary. And by collection, I mean what the library has access to for you. But we wanted to highlight that there's just a lot of stuff that can be really helpful when it comes to secondary market research. So for instance, either a public library or what we call an academic library will probably have licenses to things like the database that Kim mentioned earlier, Business Source, which has a wealth of market research reports, but also company reports. I think she mentioned SWOT analysis, different kinds of analyst reports, news and trade publication articles too, and it has global coverage. So depending on where your business or service is operating, you could maybe find reports in those geographic areas. Both types of libraries also subscribe to many different news sources. However, the public library collections will have good special collections when it comes to really popular business titles and ebooks, and also great directories so you can research competitors. VPL even has a paid service they call InfoAction, where they will do custom secondary market research for you and database searches at a cost. Academic libraries have collections that support the teaching and research needs of our business students, staff, faculty, and campus-affiliated entrepreneurs. So we subscribe to lots of different databases that include third-party analyses on specific industries, companies, and marketing strategies. As academic librarians, we try to create tools that will help people be more productive in their research. So we have things like videos or online guides to help you navigate our complex library systems, and then also librarians on staff, such as us, who are available for one-on-one consultations. And often we'll have a service point where you can even sort of drop in and ask research questions if you're able to visit us in person on site. So we really want to encourage you to take a moment to call any of those kinds of libraries you're thinking about visiting, just to confirm that they'll have what you need before you make any kind of special trip. So one of our goals, as we mentioned earlier, is to share also some ways that our library system can help you. UBC Library is the second largest research library in Canada and has 15 different sites, or branches, as we often call them, including the UBC Point Grey campus, whereas I often am working from, and as you know, UBC Okanagan campus, where Kim is located. So the first point here is, as a public researcher, you are most welcome to visit a library branch. And as I mentioned, we'll often have service points and staff available that will help you get set up on a computer or a kiosk, where you can do your own research and access our online collection. So that's the items like IBIS World and Business Source and the subscription databases that Kim mentioned earlier, but also many, many more that we haven't and don't have time to touch on today. So if you do visit, we just wanted to mention that our staff will collect some personal information like government ID, just to get you set up with what you need to be a guest researcher on site. Also kind of want to mention that unfortunately we can't provide access to absolutely everything for visiting researchers. So that's another reason to just get in touch and make sure that we actually have what you're looking for. We do have things like community cards that are available for a cost or free for Indigenous researchers, but really they're mostly useful if you're looking for print books or if you're going to be planning to visit a site regularly, so that you don't have to bother with guest ID setup. So not so good with the accessing our online special databases. I do want to touch on that UBC alumni, if that's you, they do have some additional privileges for remote or offsite database access on certain subscriptions, so we can help you navigate that if that's your situation. Secondly, it's worth mentioning again here that we've got librarians and graduate students available for consultations. So for instance, our business branch in Vancouver has a special drop-in times mentioned on their website and details on how to arrange in-person or virtual appointments, even outside of those times. And then lastly, we have two unique opportunities that were designed to support the general public. The first is called the Small Business Accelerator program, which I work from, or I'll refer to it as the SBA as we go from here, which is really focused on virtual reference assistance and freely available online tools. And then we've also got the Innovation Library, which is in Kelowna, and Kim is affiliated with that program, and that offers some in-person assistance. So I'll go into those in a bit more detail in our remaining slides today. So UBC Library's sba.ubc.ca website has lots of free resources for you and aims to be a one-stop shop for credible sources on a variety of secondary market research topics. We publish industry guides, business basics overviews on topics like business planning and evaluating your business idea, secondary market research training tools, and also a directory of support. For instance, in our business basics section of the website, there's a custom secondary market research video series that includes 5 video tutorials that are mentioned on this slide here. Each of these modules has a short explainer video ranging from about 2 to 5 minutes and goes into detail about researching different industries. And we know you're all working in very different industries, so that could be a useful starting place. And each module also has worksheets to guide your research. So this is kind of a nice complement to what we've touched on today if you'd like to dig a little deeper into these topics. Perhaps the most relevant thing to highlight today is that we've got over 100 in-depth industry guides on our website. Each guide falls into one or more of these high-level categories. So you can kind of browse from here and see if we've got something relevant to your business, service, or product, or you can just go ahead and search by keyword. Each of our guides is broken into 4 sections and lists dozens and dozens of freely available sources, as well as some of the more popular paywalled sources that our library subscribes to. So it's intended to help you navigate and make it easier for you to research the specific idea and industry you're operating in. For instance, we do have one related to the florist shop and nurseries. Each section is designed to help you find starting places to answer the most common business questions that specifically secondary data sources can help answer. While I won't go into a demo today, I wanted to just briefly touch on what's covered in each guide section, just because they are quite long. So I wanted to give you a sense of what you might expect if you were to try to find one. So the first section of every guide is called Getting Started, and it really lists books about that specific business idea or product, often with a Canadian publisher in mind, so you can kind of understand Canadian and get really specific Canadian content. We also list specific examples of business plans or marketing plans and templates from wonderful organizations that create templates to help you kind of create those documents and get you started with funding and financing opportunities. If we can find some for you, they'll be listed in that section. The next section is all about finding industry info and goes into more detail of what we've been discussing today. And it includes paid and free sources that will help you do things like identifying your NAICS codes, using that code to find other sources, researching the risks, trends, opportunities, and outlooks in your specific industry, as well as useful lists of trade associations, magazines, agencies, and others that you might want to review in that industry, just to give you sort of a head start on that type of research. The Finding Competitive Info section drills into sources and links to learn about direct and indirect competitors. So this is helpful to identify sources to research private versus public companies in your industry, gives you tips on places to start to find financial filings. You can get into the nitty-gritty if they exist on public companies in your industry, and then also news coverage. The last section in each guide is Finding Consumer Info, and that's all about identifying what demographic data is available and what secondary sources exist to learn about your target market. So to wrap up, each guide has lots of different links, research tips, and a checklist in each section to help you make the best use of your research time. So that's about all I wanted to cover about this free website. Now, I wanted to touch on another UBC resource that's open to the public, which is called UBC's Innovation Library. It's located in the public library in downtown Kelowna, right next to the recently built Innovation Center. If you can visit it, you'll get the best of both library systems in one place. At the Innovation Library, you can make an appointment to consult with a librarian about your research and access UBC Library's collection. As we wrap up, we wanted to recognize that secondary market research is an activity that can easily be overlooked. And we also wanted to highlight that can be a little bit risky. While we know it takes time, creativity, and patience, we're here to help. And of course, we're firm believers that the knowledge you gain will pay off and give you an edge on your competitors. So this is from an article in Forbes, which reminds us that if you're not doing market research, you need to remember that your competitors likely are. And the businesses that have the best understanding of what a customer needs is going to kind of end up on top. So today we really wanted to encourage you to make the best use of the secondary sources you have at your disposal that you might not know of, as it will help you validate your data-driven decisions and ensure that you can really invest in primary research where it matters most if you're opting to do both. So we hope, in conclusion, that you're excited to check out some of our favorite sources and that you have a better understanding of what you can typically find for free online, as well as what public and academic libraries typically subscribe to so that you can make the best use of being a visiting researcher. Also, we want to let you know that we'd love to hear from you, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with either of us, and our contact information is on the side, and we popped it in the chat there too, just if that's easier for you to keep it handy. And so to wrap up, we just really want to Thank you again, and thanks to UBC, Annetta and Caitlin for hosting us today. A huge thank you to all of you for attending and joining us. We can only imagine how busy all of you are, so we're really grateful for your time today and to share a little bit about your business ideas and industries and how you do research. So at this point, I think what we can do is turn it over to Netta to help facilitate some discussion and some questions.
Okay. So I know you touched this, but this question was asked before, and I think it's important to reiterate this point, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Do we have to go physically to the library to have free access to the databases?
Yes, in most cases, that is the best way for their subscription paywalled resources, unless you fit into a few of those instances like Indigenous researchers, there could be, or alumni, there could be some exceptions, but in person is the way that we can provide access.
I think too, though, Business Source might be available online for public library users. So if you're a member of VPL, for example, or check your local public library system to see what they have that's available through your library card. So that would be online on their website, or you can call them or go in and talk to a librarian to see what they have available.
Okay, thank you. There is a question of where can we ask the list of all databases?
Well, that's a good one. Certainly, we've got things like this. I can pop in the chat because academic libraries love to create lists and give you a sense, but these might be custom to whatever library you're looking at. So for example, these are some of the ones that we have at UBC that our lovely colleagues at our business library branch created. Certainly, there will be starting places throughout the guides on the SBA website. Kim, I don't know if there's others that you would suggest. Certainly getting in touch with us too could be a way to help you navigate that.
Yeah, there's like we just have so many. We have so many that I haven't even used them all with students. So probably reading, I mean, if you have time to read through a list, but I've definitely put in a link to our industry research guide, but using the guides that Aleha suggested, because they will also have links to the freely available resources. So the SBA guides, if you can get into the topic that works for you and is related to your business, then it will be more tailored to what you need. But yeah, we have lists. We love lists.
I see a question is in the chat if we can have access to the chat. So yes, you will have access to the chat in the you will not have access to the chat in the recording. But we will share the links posted in the chat in the follow-up email. Do you have to do market research if the product is barely on the Canadian market?
Maybe I can tackle that one and think about, so, if you're looking to launch a product on the Canadian market, then yeah, you would want to research the Canadian market. And it would be that you're not looking at the product, you're looking at the market. So where will it be? What are the customer needs that indicate that this product should be on the Canadian market? What are the opportunities in the Canadian market? If that's the question. So it's especially for new products is where you want to explore what are for example, what are the typical things that Canadian consumers, that we can learn about Canadian consumers that indicate that they want or need this kind of product or service. So that would be my suggestion, is that you're looking at the potential market, not necessarily the existing market in that case. I hope that answers that question.
Doris, does that answer your question? Yes, okay, thank you. You mentioned that some reports don't use high quality data. So how do you determine if a report is reliable?
Did you want to tackle that, Aleha, or I can? Because we actually just had this question this week for ourselves, in that we found there was a new producer in one of our databases that has reports on based on very specific biomedical conditions and diseases. So we were wondering, how do we know if these are good? Because we're not specialists on biomedical devices and that kind of thing. So thinking about any questions that you would normally have to validate your information sources is a great way to start. So who wrote the report? Is there an analyst indicated? Is there any background on how they produce their reports? There might be a methodology section at either the beginning or the end that you can go through to find out what their methodologies are. Is there a lot of analysis in this report, or is it just numbers? So we have some reports in Business Source actually that I don't love because they're just tables and numbers, and I don't know what to do with those. I like analysis, but a lot of people do like tables and numbers, and then they can do their own analysis from that. So thinking about, for example, with this one producer we just found, we wanted to know, like, okay, so who is the CEO of this company and why are they producing these reports? What expertise do they have in producing these reports? I think too, if you've Googled it and it's an exact product that you want and it looks perfect, it might not be perfect. I'm very skeptical about these kinds of things. So I would say that just contacting your trusted colleagues or ourselves or business advisors just to find out if they know anything about that producer is always good too. I don't know if you have any other tips or suggestions, Aleha.
You've covered tons. I would just say too, it's not uncommon for citations not to be mentioned, but in addition to methodology, those that do sort of share that information is a great tip. So taking a look and trying to follow through with those and validate by looking at those original sources where you can, could be a way to do that on your own. It's a great question. We also do, I'll try to dig them up, have some sort of checklists of the questions, the kinds of things to think about when you're evaluating that Kim walked us through too, just if that's handy to just be able to look at. We've got those kinds of lists of questions to think about too.
Great, thank you. So related to that, you kind of touched it already. What to look for when researching these numbers in the reports?
I guess it really depends what you need. So one of the things about numbers is that you might want to triangulate. So if you found some numbers in one report, you might want to go to another source and make sure that they look the same. And then maybe even a third source and just see, like, is this a pattern across the industry? Just to check those numbers out. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but just thinking about, numbers are generally typical numbers. So they're not going to be specific numbers. They're going to be typical, like typical revenues. And two, when we're thinking about the Canadian industry in particular, we don't collect a lot of things. We do collect some things. So for example, on the Industry Canada financials website that we talked about, everything is going to be typical revenue for a typical size business, or they'll categorize it in different sizes of businesses. So what gets reported is maybe a little different, because small businesses don't always have to report because they're private, whereas large businesses, publicly traded businesses, have to do a lot of reporting. So that's a way to get a bit more specific data, is to get into a large company website, but it's going to be for a large company, maybe not a small one. So if you take something from a large company and then go back and have a look at what's typical for a small company, and then think about how that might apply to you. So it's a lot of like triangulating, but also doing kind of a proxy search. So here's what I can find. How might this apply to me? I hope that gets at some of that.
Okay. So I guess another follow-up question on that. Many reports are published by American research firms. So how do you kind of import, I would say, the information from the American companies to the Canadian market?
I don't know if you want to tackle any of this, Aleha, just jump in. But I think when we're talking with students about, okay, yeah, you want to do this in Canada, you can get kind of localized data on markets by looking at, census data and that kind of thing. So take again, like what is applied in the US. So I don't know, if I was looking at, say, the footwear industry is an example I've looked at before, and there are just tons of manufacturers in the US, hardly any in Canada, and that's manufacturing. But then if you want to look at distribution, you can look and see, like, okay, we have, for example, a mapping database. We can map different businesses by NAICS codes. So you could go into your geographic area and say, well, there's this many businesses already in this part of Canada, in this province, in this region, and see what that looks like. So it might be more like you're using the US as like a typical indicator of the overall industry, and then you have to kind of match that up with what you can find about Canada. Would you say that's a good approach, Aleha? Is that?
Yeah, I'd say that. And I've heard business faculty also speak a little bit about just percentages. So the size of Canada, for example, as compared to the States. So you can just kind of estimate based on that if it's in an industry that sort of operates the same. So that could be another lens with which to try to figure those kinds of things out.
Okay, thank you so much. Ingrid, I suggested with your question you contact the library directly. And one last question, Shamin is asking, to research by words, is an educational package considered a product or a service?
I think it depends on what package means. So, if it's a software package, that might be a product that you're selling, or if it's a tutoring service, that would be a service that you're offering. So you could go in and look under educational services in the NAICS and see what the definitions are there, just to see if you could get that. But really depends on what you're planning to deliver, and so you might need to get a bit more specific with what package means.
Excellent. Okay, Kim, I'm gonna sneak one last question. Does UBCO offer classes, courses on internet research?
This would be one. It depends, again, what you mean by internet research. So UBC, there are lots of continuing studies classes, and I'm not sure what kind of computer classes they have. But we don't offer, at this point, publicly available research classes, which is why we're trying to partner with organizations that deliver this kind of webinar to be able to do this. But yeah, so not as far as I'm aware of. Aleha, do you have any suggestions?
The only thing I would say is maybe check out the SBA video tutorial that's specific to doing, a lot of it is around internet research related to industry research specifically, and secondary sources for that. So it's sort of a online DIY approach, but that exists for free.
I can put the link.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. So thank you so much, Kim and Aleha, on behalf of the participants and UBC. Thank you so much for this info-packed session. Before we let you go, one quick note about our upcoming webinar. Please stay tuned. Registration will open very soon. September 27th, we're gonna talk about buying a small business, and on October 13th, we're going to have a panel discussion on exporting for businesses in the service industry. So please make sure to sign up for our e-news and e-blast and stay updated. One quick ask before we say goodbye, please help us improve our webinars by sharing your feedback in this quick poll. I'm going to give you a few minutes to complete this poll. Okay, as you are completing the poll, just want to thank you all for sharing part of your morning with us. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.